to a new No Snark Zone, a very special episode. I'm here with Matt and Siobhan Richardson, two fight directors, actors, performers, all around amazing people. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you don't know about fighting on stage.
Oh,
Hello.
we didn't see you there.
Well, it's so nice to be here with you today.
I was just cleaning up a little.
This is their apartment, and their apartment is full of weaponry, which is something that I think I'd really like. I'm just trying to decide how dangerous this would be in my apartment.
Oh yes.
Because I'm pretty sure that I would end up using most of this stuff for cooking.
Ah.
And I'm sure that that's something that
We do keep those knives and these knives completely separate.
Surprisingly enough, we do use these almost every day because they're around. If one stands up and is thinking about something, want to pick up one of the weapons and move it around a little bit. And, just to keep the attributes up, which is very important. As a fight director, you need to know how to use the weapons you're teaching actors how to use.
Science tells us that when you have a tool or an instrument of some kind, your brain actually maps it as a limb. So like if you pick up, best example, when you're wearing your bag all the time, and then you go out without your bag, and the whole time you're like, I'm missing something. You literally are. As far as your brain's concerned, you're actually missing something. So in the same way, when you're fighting, you really need to work with them quite a bit.
I guess first major myth about fight combat is that you could actually just pick it up and put it down anytime you want. So this is actually neat. This is actually going past the idea that you have muscle memory. This is actually, the weapon has to actually become a part of yourself to be able to use it effectively.
Pretty much. I mean, one of the things when I'm teaching, I'll often, we never used to do this, but what I do now is I'll actually have my students grab the weapon and just play with it, like move it around. And I'm not necessarily checking, how well is this balanced? What I'm doing is I'm going, here brain, here's some information on this particular thing. How does this work? So I actually, I'm never going to do that in a fight, but part of my brain likes to know that.
Right.
Part of my brain likes to know how that feels and how I want to move with that.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
So what do you think that are the most important things that people don't understand about the fights that they see in the movies or the fights they see on television?
Well, movies and stage are two very different things. And
when it comes to fighting.
When it comes to fighting, because we make a very big distinction. A lot of the movie fights are handled by stunt people. You can substitute a stunt person for your lead actor, although your lead actor can do some of the fighting.
Or, depending on, of course, what country you're in, your lead actor may do all of their own fighting. But if we're talking North America or we're talking, Europe,
yeah,
generally you substitute somebody in to do that.
You're going to pop somebody in, and if they somehow get injured, because on a set, time is money. And the biggest thing, one of my instructors who taught my first intro to stage combat for film, or fighting for film class said, and I'll never forget this because it's an awesome thing to say, the years and years of practice and research you people put into your art form is completely unappreciated when you walk onto a film set. Most of the people there, including the director, have no idea what it is you do. They don't understand the way swords and sword fighting works, and they're going to want to change everything constantly.
You can also say that, you can kind of say that about the acting part of it too. No one else necessarily cares about your process, how you get there. What they need is the product at that moment.
Right.
So in the same way for stage combat, they don't care that this came from this treatise at this time. What they want is they need to see something and shoot it. And if it doesn't work for the picture, the motion they have in mind, you got to change it.
So basically you're saying that you walk on set, the director says, okay, I got this box here. Can you do kind of a jumpy thing and then come out and poke and stuff?
Yeah.
And
Sometimes you get that.
Sometimes you do get that. Occasionally you get really lucky and you get someone who says, look, I really want this kind of fight and I kind of want to storyboard it so we know how to film it and piece it together. And that's just like you're as a fight director. You're like, that's glorious.
That's a different kind of project.
I can actually tell a story with my fight. But and some films do that and some don't. But a lot of times you'll have stunt people and they are people who have trained to take risks. They've trained to be able to stand in for an actor, and if that stunt person gets injured, they can bring in another person, and that's what they train to do. Whereas on stage, you cannot swap somebody in for the guy playing Hamlet. Hamlet has to fight his own duel at the very end of Hamlet.
Right.
Tybalt and Mercutio need to fight. The people playing them, we can't just go, okay, pause. cut, stop, cover the audience's eyes. All right, bring in the stunt fighters, and action. And
Okay, you got me thinking it'd be really fun to watch a tag team Hamlet.
Yeah.
Or actually, comedy of errors. There's all sorts of like little bits, and you get like the doubles, so you need like 4 sets of twins. That'd be an international project. You'd have to.
That sounds like a really funny, actually very funny version.
Yes.
What would you say that the when you work with an actor on set who maybe doesn't have as much stage combat as you guys do, what would you say that some of the things that they misinterpret or don't understand about what they're going to be doing?
So specifically camera and stage.
Yeah, let's look at camera, because I think a lot of people are probably more familiar with.
The biggest thing I run into in both situations is an actor who wants to do something that feels violent.
Ooh.
Their process is usually, I want this to feel organic, I want it to feel natural, and when you give them an action or a movement that's based around safety. For example, if I'm going to throw a cut and Siobhan's going to evade this direction. Now, the way I want...
This is skin on steel. This is something that I don't recommend any of you doing at home, and
Right.
I will.
And
I'm just actually
bear
going
in
to.
mind, we've been working
There we
together
go.
constantly for 13 years
13
now.
and a half.
13 and a half now. And so we know each other's time and distance and cues
You know how
really,
far
really
away
well.
he is?
We've trained...
Exactly how far he is.
really, really well. We can, like, out of the blue, we can just simply...
What?
Okay.
This
It's
is
some
not
of our
domestic violence.
routines
This is.
that we know, tremendously well. So, if I'm getting back to the actor thing, so I'll have an actor who will want, who will feel. Actually, it's better if I use this sword. This sword can get really, really
Okay,
precise.
these folks really just have all this. They can just pick up
This
this
is-
at a moment's
this is
notice.
So.
Oops.
I would do an action where I would cue, Siobhan would move, and I would cut where she was. But I get a lot of actors. Now that's a nice, strong, disciplined cut. It rises here, she moves. I have nice control over. I cut to there, and now this sword is ready to come back and continue to be used. But I'll get an actor who'll want to go, yeah, but this feels better. Okay.
Now, to you, the viewers at home, which one looks more competent?
Yeah. Which one? Now we'll do them again. So.
Again, I'm gonna step back a little bit. Yes.
You? Okay. Or... Okay. Which one looks more like you're a competent sword fighter? But I'll have actors who will say, yeah, but this feels stronger. It feels so much more violent. And that's the main thing that I usually have to combat a little bit with actors who don't know sword fighting very
Right.
well.
It'd be like that same actor going, I know the line is to be or not to be, but it feels better when I go to be or not to be.
Or conversely, I could be, and maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Because it's not about
I like
the
what
words.
Philip Seymour Hoffman said that the first choice of an actor should never be to change the lines. And I always thought that was great because it's about making that actual work, like assuming that the person who wrote them had an idea.
That's an
of-
idea of what they're doing.
Yeah, and so that's the main thing that the first thing that comes up with actors. They want to do stuff that feels more right, but if violence feels organic and correct, it's probably really violent. And getting back to the difference between stage and film, we can't have real violence happen on stage. If an actor gets injured, the show shuts down.
Yeah.
Whereas
Or
if
it contains an extremely different form, of course. You know, like someone's on there with a book, which is not what the audience has asked for, and it certainly isn't the piece of art that we want to perform.
Right. Or Hamlet suddenly, for the next performance, has only one arm.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
messy.
or the fights get cut is a very common one that happens as well.
I was going to ask you, one of the things that we were talking about before we started recording was the misconception about big swords. And I found this really fascinating.
Yeah.
You guys have probably seen movies that have the big two-handed broadswords that are. Can you actually? I want to make sure that you can actually see this. This is their not toy rack. This is.
Well, technically, it's a toy or instruments we play with.
Ah!
And I guess in the front are the kind of the lower grade, lesser swords.
They're shorter.
They're shorter.
They're shorter.
Okay, they're shorter.
Shorter.
Thinner
Sorry.
blades. The that rack isn't as sturdy as the one behind. So
Okay, there you
That's
go.
all.
It's practicality. A huge array of weapons. There's also, there's quivers full of arrows and wonderful things.
And seats full of swords.
Seats
Some
full of
knives
swords.
and sticks.
We've got a handful of like knives and daggers down in this one.
And anything you could possibly want for your combat
All,
needs.
of course, blunt because they're
Yes.
stage weapons.
Stage
We
weapons.
don't have
So
anything
the
sharp.
real steel. That sounded really lame.
That actually
I'm sorry,
sounded-
but it kind of the real steel. They're real metal, but
They're
they're
metal.
just dull, right?
That's the
Stand
first
shot.
question we get when we do something for students. We walk in and they pull up the swords and they go, "Are those real?" And we're like, "Real in the sense that they exist and they're tangible."
Yeah,
They
yes,
are.
yes.
Much of what we use are real swords
These are better.
that we. Sounds just beautiful.
Oh, which one?
I have a little ting.
Sure.
So I think because one of the first sword fighting movies that I remember seeing that really made an impression on me was Excalibur.
Mm.
No.
And there's a scene in that where we've got a guy who's in full armor with a two-handed broadsword, and he's literally fighting like this. Conk.
Yeah, we've discovered over the last decade's been really exciting in the world of stage combat because we've studied a lot of historical combat, and we've discovered that the big heavy swords they don't do well against armor, even if they are big swords, because they're cutting weapons and armor got really good. In fact, there's plate mail at its best.
Nice.
Is this
Okay, more
really
weapons
well
are coming in.
articulated suit of armor that guys can climb ladders in and do rolls in. They can bolt onto their horses in them.
So this
if we
whole
think
idea of a guy having to be lifted up onto his horse with a whip.
Hoisted
Poor
onto his horse.
right? Like how's that horse going into? And then later they show you a shot of horse, and then you think the guy that has to be lifted onto his horse is gonna. Anyway, so the big two-handed swords, depending on how big they are, like we don't actually have a sword that's big enough for what I'm about to show you.
So how tall would say you were using a two-handed sword? How tall would be this two-handed sword that you would use?
It depends on which master you're following, like
Okay.
what treatise and such. This is just a little bit high for me, but some say it's like belly button and under chin. But like this one, you can see the grip is fairly wide on that. But we have others where the grips, where that distance is a lot shorter. It's a little bit more like a hand and a half because I can use it one-handed really well, but I may want to kick off with that left hand. So it kind of depends on exactly when and where and your own preferences.
And the stylistic difference that comes in, the reason we like to study this is because we can have a very different style of sword fighting. Between longsword, between some of the Scottish basket-hilted sword that I study, there's different principles of combat. And I've seen people, post stuff up saying, yeah, you didn't actually fight with this sword like this. I'm like, well, in that style you didn't, but this style over here exists, and
Right.
they actually did fight like that.
So for the two-handed swords, you can see like this isn't light, but it's also it's a lot lighter than a lot of people think they are. Like a 5-pound sword is generally not useful to you. You want somewhere like 1.5 to 2 pounds. When we're shopping for them online, if the weight gets up to like 3 pounds, we're like, sorry, no.
Well, how about those ladies doing body pump and that are doing?
Yeah.
A lot of them are using the bigger weights than that anyway.
Yeah. So you can use them that way, but when they were when they were even longer, you would use them a bit more like a pole arm. So another way you can do them is that you would have. Let's see if we can.
I'm going to move back a little bit. I totally trust them, but I'm still moving back a little.
So you can do things more like coming around, and if we get the leverage, and I can knock him down, or it's pressing down, and that kind of thing. So when you're using the really big two-handers, it's a little bit more like using a pike or something than it is about trying to cut you. Or,
Right.
of course, and I'm not going to swing this like a bat at you. There's way too much time. If Matt's got that, and I pull back to whack him in the head, I'm eating stick long before I can possibly get that into him. Now, I can try to gain the time by, like, pulling him out of the way first, but even still, he has the time to come back and do something.
So it's kind of a leverage weapon. You're using it as a lever to...
Yeah.
That's exactly what a lot of the longsword styles are. And funny enough, the staff is one that really, when I started studying stage combat, like back in 1990, the staff that we studied was with little 6-foot pieces of dowel that you can just whip around. These are closer to an actual English quarterstaff. This is about the right height for me. I should be able to lift my arm, put my hand over the top, and that's the right height for a quarterstaff, according to George Silver.
Who's an authority from a long time ago.
Yes, from Shakespearean times.
Yeah, George Silver, Quicksilver.
George Silver, look him up.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
I'll pop up a little.
And the style of the staff is just bopping somebody like this. The English quarterstaff does not look like this, like we see people do. That's much more akin to stage fighting. And we've discovered now that the English quarterstaff is more, well, the one style I've studied, because there are more than one, so that's my caveat
It's always
about
more
that.
than one.
Is more about, again, leveraging, okay, and rather than just trying to go bop in the face, which is going to irritate her or maybe give me a moment, I want to try to step through, bang, and put all my body weight into my strike to drive her to the ground. Or, if I'm being really efficient, I'd want to just leverage here and then step through, boom.
Right.
So all of my weight goes into that, and it makes a really different picture on stage than two people with light little sticks going tap, 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 tap.
Because it becomes then about the person doing the action as opposed to being about the weapon. Now, if you want to build a fight scene where it's about the weapon, then that's part of your choreographic art in that case. But you've got whatever show where the conflict between them is what's really important. And in my opinion, and what I see, especially coming from a dance background as well, when you can have that whole person involved in that action and not just like, now my sword goes out in front of me. For one thing, I look more competent because my body moves and I know how to move my body. But also it puts the focus back on this and like this, as opposed to, here's our sword and our focus is on the stuff between us.
Right. Well, and that is, I mean, I harp on this all the time. This is better storytelling. This is two people having a fight instead of looking for the most fancy way to do the fight.
So think back to something like The Princess Bride. That fight scene is not a great fight scene just because they're doing fancy moves. There's a constant dialogue and a constant interaction and reaction. That fight develops as it goes along. Now, historically, if we look at that fight, we go, well, that's not really martially sound or correct. But that fight scene works because it's a fight scene, not a martial arts demonstration.
Right.
And
they're talking it through as if they're doing, if you haven't seen The Princess Bride, I don't even know why you're watching this video, just rush out and grab a copy of The Princess Bride. Because they're talking it through as if it's a chess game. I am countering this style with this style. This defense works very well against. Yes.
Yeah. And there's a progression. We see who's gaining the advantage at what time. We see them one-upping themselves. We see our one character getting more and more desperate and then realizing finally, oh, I'm in trouble. He's better than I am.
Yeah, we see one of them taking the higher ground. We see what happens when one of the people takes the higher ground.
Real sense of status shift, real sense of win and loss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whereas if you look at something like, well, one of my least favorite fights, the Phantom Menace lightsaber fight, it's a lot of flashy moves and flips and jumps and kicks, but there's no real story or progression to that fight that is really visible. And my friends always say, yeah, but what about when the barriers come between and they have that great moment? I said, yeah, the fight stopped. And that's a lot of what we see on stage. We see, we're acting, now we fight. Stop. Now we act a bit more. Now we fight. And what we like to do...
It's like watching the musical where everything stops and people start to sing. Yeah.
See, I actually had a class in school called Connections, because like to combat that problem of like, no, it's not scene, everything stops, the story begins. You have to bring it through, or else like, how am I supposed to sing about the depth of my experience if I stop that experience and happen to let some noise come out of my mouth? Like pretty noise, one hopes. But look at some of our favorite performers. They don't have beautiful, beautiful voices, but they have beautiful expression. Like Ethel Merman, that's a very unique voice and a great sound that she has. But if you said give me a beautiful sound, that's not the first person you're going to think of.
So yeah, that connection, that the storytelling with when we have an ideal setting where we've got some trained actors who we can really show how to use the weapons properly, so they can, one, keep themselves safe, which is always our first priority. But second, if they understand how the tactics of the art form work, they can play those tactics in the fight and they can stay connected here instead of just walking through their paint-by-numbers choreography.
And as the performer's skill increases, just grab a sword for me. Just grab anything.
Oh yeah.
As the performer's skill increases, we can go from focusing on, we can more deeply engage in the actual tactics of the sword itself. So we can play that really fast chess game that is sword play. We're a little bit close because we're restricted by camera angles and stuff. But when I'm in guard, like I can't hit him here. So you bet that in the context of our scene, and I want to annoy him, I'm going to put this right between our eye line because I want him to see that. But let's say it's a different situation. I'm like totally cocky. I might even step into his range, which is closer than mine because our swords are different lengths, and just be like, I'm going to come there instead, okay. But I can actually play that knowing that I'm in danger. Like here, I'm not as much in danger as when I just pass into the point where he can now hit me. Oh, yikes. And actually, so as you get more skilled with these weapons, and you understand as your brain maps them, as your chi, as your vita understands where the danger zone, and we can actually play with that, just like in an acting scene where, I'm going to do what I can to provoke you because both of us need to be alive and present. So the better we understand these, the more alive and present we can be, and use this again as part of our tactics, part of our tools, part of our verbiage in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome.